We're now joined by Umunyana Rugege. Umunyana, let's bring you back into the conversation once again. Who are the members of this coalition, the 40 civil society organizations?
So these are all organizations, including Section 27, the Treatment Action Campaign, and MSF, Doctors Without Borders. And as well as patient advocacy groups such as the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, the Cancer Alliance, a range of organizations that really work on the front line to try and get people access to healthcare services.
You'd already started this, but just break down for us what you foresee to be the problem should the law continue as it stands.
Sure. I think it's important for us to understand that we already have a legal framework around patents. We have a few problems with those laws, and we've been calling for the amendment of those laws. We've been in a process for the last 10 years of amending those laws, and 2 years ago, Cabinet approved an IP policy that really prioritized public health. And we are now looking forward to the draft legislation that should be coming out. And we've also called for the prioritization of that legislation to be promulgated as quickly as possible. And one of the issues that we have raised is that we have a depository system of patent application. So if a company wants to get a patent on a technology, they just simply apply and comply with very administrative processes, and they're awarded a 20-year exclusivity. Now, what we're saying is that because we have that system currently, we should, as a priority, put a moratorium on all new patents. And I think we're in agreement with the government because President Cyril Ramaphosa last week signed on to a letter, along with other African leaders and leaders from around the world, calling for any vaccine that comes out. And as you know, there are over 100 current testing clinical trials for a vaccine, that any vaccine that does emerge anywhere in the world should be patent-free. And we understand that because we know the current system prioritizes profits over public health. And there are many people around the world, activists and governments, talking about the problem with that system and the fact that that system does not work in a global pandemic, and that we need greater solidarity from governments, richer governments, as well as from the private sector. And so I think we are in agreement around the need for patent-free technologies that will ensure that there's greater access, because the price point is not fixed by the pharmaceutical company if there are no patents.
Now, besides price, access to vaccines and who gets it first when it comes out is a global conversation at the moment. How influential is this coalition in terms of steering those decisions?
So I think that our Fix the Patent Law coalition has worked in solidarity with a range of civil society organizations around the world that are all pushing for very similar things in their own countries, because the current system really does prioritize profits. And what we're saying is that we can't, as African countries in particular, and low and middle income countries around the world, we can't be at the back of the queue when a vaccine does come through. There are many companies working very hard. There's a lot of money being spent. But I think importantly, we should note that there's a lot of public money being spent on trying to find a technology that will work and that will eventually be a global public good. And I think that there's this moment now globally where we're saying we need solidarity, because we've seen what happens when treatment is not available because it's too expensive. We had an HIV epidemic in this country, and people died because they could not afford the price of antiretroviral treatment. So we've been there, we've done that, and we had that fight. Now the fight is to ensure that the technologies that come out in relation to COVID, which affects everyone in the world, is available on a needs basis rather than on the basis of countries and people that can afford it. And the great fear is that rich countries may hoard that kind of technology or vaccine or treatment and keep it from getting to the countries that actually need it.
Now, with a government that's juggling priorities in the fight against COVID-19, have you had any response in terms of the conversation you wanting to start from government?
Well, we've been engaging with government for a few years in relation to the intellectual property policy, and we've had a good working relationship with the DTI around these issues. So this is an ongoing conversation that we're having with government. In particular, we've reached out to the president, and in terms of timing, we put out our statement at the same time that President Ramaphosa signed on to this letter that calls for an agreement at an international level that will ensure patent-free vaccines. And we would go further to say it's not just the vaccines, it is any kind of treatment. And there's a lot of kind of research and development going on around the world to try and find what treatments will work. And I think, there's 7 billion people in the world. We're going to need more than one company and more than one drug and more than one vaccine to be able to reach every person in every country that needs.
So in this time that different governments, especially our government, has called for solidarity, how are you reaching out to the innovators? Are they open to the possibility of relaxing their patents?
Well, those conversations are happening globally, I think. And some of these pharmaceutical companies are talking about pooling the technology. And there is an organization called the Medicines Patent Pool that is also engaged in these conversations. And they have successfully created a pool that will allow for technologies to be used, the knowledge around the technologies to be used by generic companies so that more medicines are available to the people who need them. So those conversations are happening at different levels between governments and companies. They are working with foundations such as the Wellcome Trust. And so there are many, many kinds of conversations, coalitions. Different pharmaceutical companies are working together. So there's that kind of solidarity in the private sector as well, which we welcome, to ensure quicker progress in finding solutions and health technologies that will work and stop people dying.
Let's thank you for talking to us this morning, but mostly, how can the public take part in this process of engaging government?
I think, these issues are very complex, and we've tried to break down this information so that people can really understand and engage with the topic. You can follow the Fix the Patent Laws coalition online on all social media platforms, as well as Section 27 and the Treatment Action Campaign. We are putting out a lot of information so that people can understand these issues and how it impacts on our country's response. And people are engaged at different levels in our country's response and should be engaged also on future treatments and vaccines for South Africa and for other African countries.
Thank you once again.